I discovered my wife's betrayal in the most luxurious place of our lives. On our multimillion-dollar yacht. Surrounded by blue seas, expensive champagne, and a lifestyle few people reach before turning 30. At that moment, I was a young prodigy CEO, owner of multimillion-dollar companies, with rapidly growing wealth and everything money can buy. Everything, except loyalty. She thought she could trade me for someone from the elite, someone built on appearances, someone who promised status without building anything. What she didn't realize was that this choice would change her destiny forever. While she laughed, betrayed me and looked down on me, I made the decision that would turn my pain into power. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I grew. And I grew so much that, sometime later, she saw me married to a far better woman, emotionally, morally, and as a life partner. This is not just a story of betrayal. It's a story about money, luxury, wrong choices, and the price of underestimating a man who built everything from nothing. Stay until the end because when regret knocked on her door, it was already too late. If you enjoy real, intense stories filled with luxury, downfall, power, and epic twists, subscribe to the channel now. Because this story will make you reflect, and maybe remind you of someone you know. I was only 25 years old, but my life already looked like that of someone who had won too early. I was the CEO of 2 companies valued in the millions, with active contracts growing month after month and a net worth that kept climbing. While many were still trying to figure out what to do with their lives, I was signing decisions that moved large sums of money, negotiating with investors, and sleeping little to protect what I had built. Money was never luck for me, it was strategy. Luxury was not about showing off, it was a consequence. And from the outside, everything looked solid, organized, and admirable. My routine was marked by strategic meetings in glass-walled rooms, city views, and reports showing constant growth. I flew business class, crossed countries in a matter of days, and learned to make fast decisions under pressure. Gala dinners were part of my schedule, not for the glamour but because that was where people who thought big like me were. It was a world of high figures, expensive watches, and conversations about acquisitions, mergers, and international expansion. I breathed business. I lived like a true millionaire entrepreneur. In the mansion's garage, the cars were not just vehicles. They were symbols of what I had achieved before turning 30. A sports car for days when I needed to feel control, a luxury sedan for formal meetings, another for long trips. Every detail of my life reflected discipline and focus. The house overlooked the ocean, with wide windows and enough silence to think big. It wasn't just comfort, it was a setting of victory. I believed I had mastered every area of life. Even with so much money involved, I was never arrogant. I always considered myself a polite, kind, and approachable man. I treated employees with respect, partners with loyalty, and clients with seriousness. Maybe that's why my image was that of a promising young CEO, balanced and trustworthy. I believed that success without character doesn't last. And I made that a principle. In the middle of so much luxury, I still believed in simple values. And there was something I considered the greatest symbol of my success: my marriage. To me, having built a financial empire before 25 and still having a beautiful wife by my side meant everything was in its place. I believed I had found someone to share the top with me. Someone who understood the weight of responsibility, the price of money, and the value of stability. I was proud to say I was married. That felt complete to me. From the outside, our image was perfect. A young, well-dressed couple, traveling to paradise destinations, attending exclusive events, and being admired wherever we went. People saw luxury, security, and success. I saw partnership. I saw construction. I saw a future. It never crossed my mind that something could fall apart so quickly. When you're at the top, the ground feels too far away to fall. I worked thinking about guaranteeing even more comfort, more security, and more growth. Every financial decision was also a decision for our future. I believed love was shown through presence, protection, and stability. And I offered all of that. A mansion, trips, experiences, status. I believed I was being the best husband possible within the world I knew. A world where money is a daily language. What I didn't realize was that the top also attracts different kinds of looks. The higher you climb, the more people watch. And not all of them look with admiration. Some look with desire. Others with comparison. And some begin to measure what you offer against what others promise. At that moment, I still didn't understand that. I thought I was surrounded by certainty. I lived convinced that everything was under control. A growing company, balanced accounts, a solid image, and an apparently stable marriage. I never imagined that while I was celebrating professional achievements, something was beginning to change silently beside me. And that change didn't come from business or money or luxury, It came from the person I least expected. I met my wife when my life was already on the rise, but still far from the peak I would reach later. She came into my life as someone who seemed to understand my pace, my ambition, and the weight of being a young entrepreneur surrounded by expectations. She was beautiful, elegant, always well-dressed, with a presence that drew attention in any environment. From our very first meeting, I noticed that she liked being around successful people. At the time, I interpreted that as admiration. Today, I know it was something deeper. She had a sharp eye for luxury details. She noticed expensive watches, imported cars, exclusive restaurants. She talked about international travel as if it were a natural part of life. I, who came from a path of effort and strategy, saw that as someone who matched me. I believed she had the right mindset to grow by my side. I didn't see vanity, I saw ambition. And ambition in the business world was always something I respected. When we started dating, I made a point of including her in my world. I took her to gala dinners, corporate events, meetings with investors and high-level entrepreneurs. She adapted too quickly. She spoke with ease, smiled at the right moments, and seemed comfortable in that world of wealth and status. That made me proud. I felt I had found someone worthy of my financial and social growth. Over time, I began investing even more in our comfort. Trips abroad became frequent. 5-star hotels, exclusive experiences, everything at the highest level. I enjoyed providing that because, to me, sharing achievements was part of success. Every business class ticket, every piece of jewelry, every sophisticated dinner was my way of saying she was part of my empire. I believed that strengthened our connection. When I proposed to her, it wasn't out of pressure or impulse. It was because, rationally and emotionally, she seemed like the right choice. A young, beautiful, ambitious woman walking with me toward the top. The wedding was elegant, attended by influential people, executives, entrepreneurs, and friends from the corporate world. It was more than a ceremony, it was a public confirmation that I had won in every area of life. After the wedding, I made sure to raise our standard even higher. The mansion overlooking the ocean became our home. The luxury cars were shared. Unlimited credit cards were at her disposal. I never controlled spending, never questioned her choices. In my mind, trust was the foundation of any relationship. And money to me was a tool, not a cage. I believed I was building security, not dependence. She seemed happy. At least that's what she showed. Impeccable posture, constant presence at events, perfect photos on trips, carefully calculated smiles. People admired us. They commented on how we were a successful couple, young, rich, and apparently in love. I believed in that image because, in many moments, I felt it was real too. I was too busy building to be suspicious. I always tried to be an affectionate man within my limits. Even with a packed schedule, I made an effort to be present, send messages, plan moments together. I believed love was sustained by attention, respect, and financial stability. And I offered all of that in abundance. Maybe even too much. I didn't realize that the more I gave, the more she got used to it, and the less she valued it. What I didn't know was that while I saw partnership, she was beginning to see comparison. While I thought about growing together, she was watching other men, other lifestyles, other promises. Something inside her began to change silently. I still believed I was sharing the top with the right woman, without imagining that soon I would start being measured, questioned, and compared. Our routine began to revolve around a standard of living that very few people truly know. Exclusive parties in multimillion-dollar penthouses, private events for entrepreneurs and celebrities, dinners where a single bottle of wine cost more than many people's annual salary. I paid for everything without thinking twice because that world was part of my reality as a CEO. Money moved fast, businesses kept growing, and luxury felt like a natural detail of success. She fit perfectly into that lifestyle. Designer clothes, highly sought-after handbags, jewelry that drew attention in any room. I watched it with a certain satisfaction, believing I was offering the best. When we traveled, it wasn't ordinary tourism. It was exclusive experiences, 5-star hotels, suites with privileged views and personalized service. Every international trip reinforced the idea that our life was special. Meanwhile, my work routine became more and more intense. Long meetings, complex negotiations, decisions involving millions. I knew that to sustain that standard, I had to stay one step ahead at all times. Growth wasn't an option, it was an obligation. And I did it with total focus. I was building high-value companies while believing I was building a solid marriage. She, on the other hand, began living more for the shine than for the effort behind it. She started attending events alone, gatherings where appearance mattered more than substance. I saw it as independence, as someone enjoying what we had built together. It didn't bother me. I trusted her. Maybe too much trust is a luxury not everyone deserves. The luxury gym became part of her routine. An exclusive personal trainer, a sophisticated environment, beautiful and successful people circulating all the time. I saw no problem with that. On the contrary, I encouraged it. I wanted her to feel good, confident, valued. I never imagined that space would also become a stage for silent comparisons and looks loaded with interest. At parties, I noticed something that I ignored at the time. She seemed more interested in the attention she received than in my presence. Smiles that lasted too long, conversations that stretched on when I stepped away to take a business call. I always returned to my place beside her, thinking everything was normal. Today I understand that some signs don't make noise when they appear. My world was divided between spreadsheets, contracts, and financial projections. Hers began to revolve around likes, looks, compliments, and social status. While I talked about business growth, she commented on who was wearing what, who had bought which car, who was traveling to which destination. I thought it was superficial but harmless. I was wrong. The more money I made, the more emotionally distant she seemed to become. Not in words but in energy. The light in her eyes changed depending on the environment, not on our connection. I still believed it was just a phase, the result of the intense rhythm of the luxury life we lived. I never thought the problem wasn't too much work, but too much comparison. I continued being the provider, the strategist, the man who sustained everything. Not just financially but structurally. Without me, that world simply wouldn't exist. Still, I felt something being slowly drained, as if the foundation were being quietly eroded. I couldn't explain it, I could only feel it. It was during that period that small changes began to become more evident. Subtle comments, different looks, a distance that was hard to define. Nothing explicit, nothing that justified direct suspicion. Just that uncomfortable feeling that something was slipping out of alignment. And that was exactly when the first real signs began to appear. That was the point when something began to slip out of place in a more visible way, even though it was still silent. There were no fights, no accusations, no abrupt changes. Just small, offhand remarks, comments that seemed harmless but carried a strange weight. Observations about me working too much, about other men managing to balance life better, about elite couples who traveled together more often. Everything was said casually, almost like meaningless conversation. She started comparing routines without realizing it, or perhaps realizing it all too well. She talked about businessmen who appeared more on social media, who trained every day, who were always present at trendy events. I listened without reacting, believing it was just curiosity. After all, in my world, comparison had always existed. I didn't imagine that this time, I was the one being placed on the scale. My absence began to be used as an argument. Not as a direct complaint, but as disguised irony. Small comments about dining alone, trips I had to cancel because of important meetings, events where she showed up without me. I always compensated with comfort, gifts, future trips. To me, that was balance. To her, it was starting to become justification. The luxury gym stopped being just a healthy habit. It began to take up more space than before. Extended hours, workouts that never lined up with mine, new stories about interesting people she met there. Names appeared in conversations as if they were irrelevant, but they always came with subtle smiles. I didn't pay attention. I trusted too much to be suspicious. Social events changed as well. She began moving in circles where I was no longer the center. Parties where money didn't come from hard work, but from image, influence, and appearance. People who lived on status, not on real building. I showed up less, she showed up more. And little by little, I stopped being a reference in that environment. When we were together, I noticed a distance that was hard to explain. It wasn't declared coldness, it was a lack of connection. Shorter conversations, less genuine interest in what I said. I talked about a new company expansion, a multimillion-dollar contract, an important strategic decision, and she listened as if she was no longer impressed. The money that once fascinated her now seemed like an obligation. I started to feel like I had to prove things that used to be natural. Prove that I was interesting, that my success was still relevant, that my presence had value. That had never been part of our relationship. I had always been secure, confident, aware of my place. But that silent shift began to stir something inside me that I didn't like feeling. Even so, I rationalized everything. I told myself it was just a phase, that too much luxury and social routine confused people. I believed it was enough to adjust my schedule, plan a trip, surprise her with something new. I always thought problems were solved with action. I never imagined that the problem was no longer in me. What I didn't know was that while I tried to fix small static noises, something much bigger was already in motion. An interest growing away from my eyes, fueled by comparison, vanity, and easy promises. I still thought I was in control of the situation. But control had already begun to slip. And it was exactly at that moment, when I still believed everything could be adjusted with dialogue and effort, that reality decided to reveal itself in the cruelest possible way. A scenario where luxury, the sea, and betrayal would collide head-on. The day seemed designed to celebrate everything I had achieved up to that point. Our luxury yacht was anchored at one of the most exclusive coastal destinations, surrounded by crystal-clear water and a golden sky that reflected wealth, success, and power. I had always seen the yacht as the ultimate symbol of my financial growth. Every detail there was expensive, every meter represented the right decisions. It was the kind of setting few reach before 30. I was proud of that moment. I had no idea it would mark the beginning of the end. She seemed different from the moment we stepped on board. More distant, quieter, yet restless. She wore an expensive dress, perfectly chosen to draw attention. I noticed, complimented her as I always did. She smiled, but it was a strange, empty smile. I blamed it on the heat, on fatigue, on anything other than what it truly was. Luxury tends to deceive us because everything looks too beautiful to go wrong. While I handled a few quick matters on the phone, something inside me began to feel uneasy. It wasn't a clear intuition, it was discomfort. The kind of feeling that doesn't shout but insists. I walked through the yacht with the excuse of grabbing a drink, but my steps led me to a place I will never forget. The sound of the sea muffled voices, but it didn't hide the scene that was about to reveal itself. I saw her. There, in what should have been our refuge, our private space, our achievement. She was with another man, someone from the elite, someone who lived on image, influence, and appearance. One of those men who liked to enjoy luxury they didn't build. The closeness between them left no room for doubt. It wasn't conversation, it wasn't friendship, it wasn't coincidence. It was blatant betrayal. For a few seconds, time simply stopped. My body froze, but my mind raced too fast. I didn't feel immediate anger. I felt disbelief. This was happening on my yacht, paid for with my money, the result of my work. Every inch of that space was my effort materialized. And yet, I was being disrespected in the most direct way possible. She saw me. Our eyes met, and in that instant everything became clear. The shock on her face wasn't remorse, it was fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of losing comfort, fear of watching the castle collapse. The man beside her stepped back, visibly uncomfortable, like someone who realizes too late what he's gotten into. No words were spoken, but everything was understood. The silence was deafening. I didn't shout, I didn't move forward, I didn't cause a scene. I simply observed. I watched how someone is capable of destroying everything for vanity. I watched how the luxury I offered became the stage for my humiliation. In that moment, I understood something I had never understood before. I wasn't loved for the man I was, but for the lifestyle I provided. The sea remained calm, the sun kept shining, and the yacht stayed immaculate. The contrast between the beauty of the setting and the rot of the situation was almost cruel. I felt something die inside me right there. It wasn't the businessman, it wasn't the CEO, it wasn't the millionaire. It was the husband who believed in partnership, loyalty, and building together. I stepped away in silence, my posture intact, but my heart heavy. There was no argument at that moment. No immediate confrontation. Just a decision beginning to take shape, cold, logical, and definitive. That day wouldn't end in an explosion but in a rupture. And what would come next would be far deeper than she could imagine. As the yacht continued to sway gently on the sea, I already knew that nothing would ever be the same. The betrayal had been revealed, but the consequences were still to come. And they would not be light nor quick. At that point, something in me changed permanently. There was no emotional explosion, no immediate confrontations, no dramatic scenes as many might imagine. What followed was silence. A heavy, calculated, cold silence. I continued walking around the yacht as if nothing had happened, but inside, everything was being rearranged. The CEO in me took complete control. Emotion took a back seat. Logic began to govern every thought. I realized that the pain didn't just come from the betrayal, but from the realization that I had been used. Used for my money, my status, the comfort I provided. Every trip, every gift, every luxury experience flashed before my eyes like pieces of a misinterpreted puzzle. I wasn't in a marriage, I was in a one-sided emotional contract. And in that moment, that contract was broken without warning. I continued treating everyone around me with politeness, including her. Not out of weakness but out of self-control. I knew that any impulsive reaction would place me in the wrong. The true power, as I had learned in business, lies in those who maintain composure when everything is falling apart. I watched, I analyzed, I calculated. While she tried to act as if nothing had happened, I was already several steps ahead. At night, alone, the weight would come. Not in the form of tears but of deep reflections. I asked myself where I had gone wrong, at what moment I confused love with financial comfort. I remembered canceled meetings, postponed promises, choices made believing I was building something solid. For the first time, I realized that not everything can be solved with money, planning, or strategy. Even surrounded by luxury, I felt empty. The mansion seemed too big, the silence too loud. What had once been a symbol of victory now felt like a cold setting. Money still flowed in, the business thrived, but something essential had been ripped away. It wasn't my self-esteem or my professional confidence. It was the idea of partnership, of companionship, of walking together. She noticed my distance but misinterpreted it. She thought I was just busy, focused on work as I had been many times before. She tried to act normally, starting conversations, planning social events. I responded politely but without involvement. There was no more space for intimacy. Something had been irreversibly broken, even if it hadn't been verbalized yet. In the following days I became even more disciplined. I woke up early, trained, dove into work, closed deals, made important decisions. The pain became silent fuel. Every meeting was held with more precision, every negotiation with more coldness. I wasn't running from the problem, I was preparing myself. Preparing for my next move just as I always did in business. I understood that some losses don't require a scandal, they require a decision. It's not about who shouts the loudest but about who walks away whole. And I was determined to walk away whole, even if that meant leaving behind someone I loved. The silence wasn't the absence of feeling, it was maturity. It was the beginning of a transformation that she still couldn't see. While she continued believing everything could be fixed with charm, I had already made an internal choice. A choice that didn't involve immediate forgiveness, nor automatic reconciliation. It involved consequence. And that consequence was about to materialize clearly, legally, and definitively. The passionate man had been hurt, but the millionaire businessman was more lucid than ever. And when these two forces separate, something inevitable happens. The next step wouldn't be emotional, it would be strategic. And it would change everything. When I decided to speak, it wasn't in a moment of rage or during an argument. It was in a cold, objective conversation, almost corporate. I told her I wanted a divorce with the same firmness I approved million-dollar contracts. I didn't raise my voice, I didn't make emotional accusations. I simply presented the decision as something irreversible. It took her a few seconds to realize that I wasn't bluffing. At first, she laughed as if she believed it was just a passing scare. She said that every couple goes through crises, that I was exaggerating, that we could resolve everything by traveling or changing our routine. She spoke lightly as if money could erase boundaries. She truly believed my love was unconditional, even after the betrayal. It was then that I realized how much she underestimated me. When she saw I wouldn't back down, her tone shifted. There were attempts at emotional manipulation, calculated tears, empty promises. She said it had all been a mistake, that I was the man of her life. But no words came with real responsibility. It was fear of losing comfort, not genuine remorse. I explained that the empire I had built was mine. The companies, the investments, the contracts, everything was protected. The luxury she lived in wasn't an eternal right, it was a choice that depended on loyalty. Cards would be cancelled, accounts separated, privileges revoked. Not out of revenge but out of consequence. For the first time she heard no from someone who had always said yes. She didn't react with humility. She reacted with contempt. She said I was being cold, cruel, selfish. That no real man would abandon a woman because of a mistake. She tried to blame me, putting the responsibility for her betrayal on me. It was easier to turn me into the villain than to face her own choices. The process moved quickly. Lawyers, documents, signatures. I handled everything as I would any important business decision. With strategy, clarity, and protection of my assets. While she complained about the injustice of the situation, I focused on preserving what I had built with so much effort. Money doesn't accept unresolved emotions. And I knew that better than anyone. When she left the mansion, she took only what was truly hers. No luxury cars, no unlimited cards, no lifestyle to flaunt. The silence that day was heavy. For the first time she felt the real impact of the loss. It wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the end of a lifestyle. Even then she still believed this was temporary. That I would miss her, that I would change my mind, that I would beg. I saw that hope in her eyes. A hope based on the past, not the present. She didn't understand that the man she betrayed no longer existed in the same way. While she tried to keep up appearances, I moved forward with absolute focus. Expanding businesses, new projects, bold decisions. The divorce didn't paralyze me, it freed me. For the first time in a long time, I didn't have to maintain an image for someone who didn't value me. She still talked about me to friends, trying to justify her own emotional failure. I didn't respond, didn't explain, didn't defend myself. Those who build in silence don't need to convince anyone. The game had shifted, but she still hadn't fully realized it. What she didn't know is that, while she tried to stay relevant in a world that demands a high price, I was about to reach an even higher level. A level where regret knocks on the door too late. I met this new woman when my life was already at a different level, both financially and emotionally. It wasn't at an extravagant party or in an environment of empty ostentation. It was in a professional setting where character, posture, and intelligence speak louder than designer clothes. She didn't try to impress me, didn't ask about cars, didn't comment on trips. That alone caught my attention. I was used to being seen as an asset, not as a man. She was discreet, elegant, confident in herself. She didn't need external validation to feel important. She spoke to me while looking me in the eyes, interested in what I thought, not in what I owned. When I talked about business, she listened with genuine curiosity, not calculation. For the first time in a long while, I felt that my mind was more interesting than my bank account. That changed everything. Over time, I began to notice a different pattern. She didn't compete with me, didn't compare me to other men, didn't place me in invisible competitions. She admired discipline, vision, and consistency. She wasn't impressed by luxury, but she knew how to appreciate it when it made sense. She understood that money is a tool, not an identity. That brought me a peace I had never known. When we started going out, the contrast became even more evident. Sophisticated restaurants, well-planned trips, exclusive experiences. She adapted to everything naturally, without excess, without exaggerated vanity. She didn't need to post, didn't need to prove anything. She was present. I realized that true luxury is sharing moments with someone who isn't there out of interest. By her side, my emotional standard rose. Deep conversations, comfortable silence, real support. I could talk about pressure, difficult decisions, the responsibilities of being a young CEO with multimillion-dollar companies. She didn't pull away, didn't diminish my struggles. On the contrary, she understood. That reinforced something I had lost in the past: true partnership. I changed as well. I started choosing better where to go, who to be with, how to spend my time. Money kept growing, businesses prospered, but now there was balance. It was no longer about proving power, it was about enjoying things consciously. Her presence made everything lighter, more organized, more real. I was living a more mature kind of success. It was inevitable that the world around us would notice. Friends, partners, people from the same social circle began to see the difference. They commented on how I seemed happier, more centered. Some said I had found someone better. And maybe they were right. Not better in appearance or status, but better in essence. That can't be bought, it's recognized. I knew that at some point my ex-wife would notice this change too. The world we live in is small when it comes to elite circles, money, and influence. Information travels fast. Photos appear, comments surface, stories cross paths. I didn't provoke, I didn't hide. I simply lived my new reality naturally. With each achievement, with every step forward, I felt I had made the right choice by not going back. The past no longer pulled me in. The present made sense. And the future looked promising beside someone who walked with me, not over me. I was ready to embrace this new chapter publicly and definitively. I just didn't imagine that this new standard of life and relationship would bring two opposing realities face to face. And that the next encounter would bring regret, late attempts, and a truth impossible to hide. The reunion happened inevitably, as it always does when two worlds that were once one follow opposite paths within the same elite. I was at a private event, surrounded by entrepreneurs, investors, and people who moved millions. My new wife was by my side, elegant, confident, respected. When I saw her enter the room, I immediately noticed the change. She was no longer the confident woman from before. She looked out of place in that setting. She watched me from a distance, trying to recognize in the man before her the husband she betrayed on the yacht. But I was no longer the same. My posture, my energy, the way I spoke and moved made that clear. The success I had achieved after the separation wasn't just financial, it was emotional. I was whole. And that bothered her more than any car or mansion ever could. When our eyes met, I saw something in her that I had never seen before. Real regret. Not the theatrical kind used to manipulate, but a silent, heavy regret that was hard to hide. She realized she hadn't lost just a millionaire husband. She had lost stability, partnership, and respect. And now she saw me living all of that with another woman, someone who didn't need to betray anyone to get there. She approached cautiously, like someone stepping on unstable ground. She tried to start a conversation, to bring up the past, to talk about good moments. I listened politely but without opening any space. There was no nostalgia, no longing. Only distance. Every word she spoke felt late, like a request that arrives when the door is already closed. At some point she tried to ask for forgiveness. She said she had been confused, that she made wrong choices, that she regretted them. She spoke while looking at me but also at what I represented. At the man who had won, at the CEO who had grown even more, at the standard of living she couldn't sustain on her own. And I understood everything without her having to say much. I responded calmly, without aggression. I said that forgiving didn't mean going back. That some actions changed destinies permanently. That the man she betrayed on the yacht no longer existed. What stood there now was someone who had learned to value himself. Someone who understood that love cannot be built on interest and comparison. She tried to insist, to suggest a reconnection, as if the past could be rewritten. That was when the gap between us became clear. While she looked backward, trying to recover something lost, I looked forward, to the life I had built without her. There was no longer compatibility, neither emotional nor moral. My new wife stayed by my side the entire time, without needing to say a single word. Her presence was enough. She didn't compete, didn't watch with insecurity, didn't diminish herself. She knew who she was and the place she occupied. That alone showed the difference between someone who adds and someone who only consumes. When I said goodbye, I did so with respect but with firmness. I left no openings, I fed no hopes. Some stories need to end clearly so they don't come back to haunt you. I walked away knowing I had made the right choice. Not out of pride but out of self-respect. Today when I look back, I understand that the betrayal was the turning point I needed to evolve. I lost a wife, but I gained vision, maturity, and an even greater empire. She was left with regret, comparison, and the certainty that wrong choices charge high interest. And I moved on, laughing last, exactly as always happens to those who respect themselves. In the end, this story was never just about betrayal. It was about choices. About the kind of person you decide to be when no one is watching. And about the silent price of trading character for appearance, and stability for illusion. I moved on not out of revenge but out of self-respect. I understood that no one truly prospers while supporting someone who chose to betray them. That money may attract many people, but only character keeps someone by your side when everything is on the line. And maybe, while you're listening to this story, a name is crossing your mind right now. Maybe you're living something similar. Maybe you're ignoring signs, accepting less than you deserve, confusing love with comfort. Tell me in the comments, would you forgive a betrayal like this? Would you go back to someone who traded you in when you were at your peak? If this story made you think, reflect, or feel something inside, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here you'll find real, intense, unfiltered stories, where karma always collects and the one who laughs last, laughs best.